Today we're going to cover just a quick summary of the audiobook boom, some best practices, incorporating it into existing processes, and then at the end, if you want to send through any questions, we'll look to answer those towards the end of the webinar. This webinar will go for approximately 45 minutes, so you can sit tight and enjoy the show. So just a little bit about Virtusales. Virtusales have been around for close to 20 years now and have been developing Biblio, which is a software suite used by book publishers to cover end-to-end publishing processes. So for us, we've done many successful implementations across the world, and each time there's a change in the publishing industry, such as audiobooks, ebooks, we are around and we're developing the software to support our publishers who then need to deliver these to the end customers. Here's some examples of some of our customers. They range in size from 2 users to 2,500 users. So the software is very flexible and can be used by any size publisher, because essentially, whether you're small or large in publishing, you still have to do exactly the same tasks, whether it's managing royalties, production costs, distribution, metadata. It's all the same task, but just on a different scale. So for us, we're dealing with lots of different publishers in lots of different industries in terms of scholarly education that we can tap into for seeing how they're doing and managing various processes. So as we all hear in all the conferences and in the newsletters is the growth of audiobooks. Essentially audiobooks, this is just a repeat of the ebook evolution 5, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, where everyone was scrambling to find, do they have ebook rights? How do they go about incorporating ebooks into their front list production process, and then also going through their backlists and converting all of their ebooks. So what it really looks like is just a repeat of that, but now we're looking at it from audiobooks point of view, and audiobooks is different in terms of some of the things that you need to be aware of, but you can incorporate that into your general publishing processes, and that's what people need to think about more and more when they're looking at that and they're looking to acquire new titles. Is audiobooks is going to be an income stream that they need to think about, just like they would for rights, ebooks, paperbacks, etc. So all increasing in all the streams, whether it's been in terms of users, in terms of sales. So there is lots of opportunity in the audiobook market. In terms of our customers and what they are feeling about audiobooks, a lot of them are focusing heavily on that. They've even created their own imprints to deal specifically with the audiobook requirements, where others are outsourcing it. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach the audiobook requirement. But suffice to say, it is where a lot of publishers are looking to increase their income, which is potentially on another area, maybe it's on ebooks, isn't coming through as with as big a growth as it was in previous years. I think this comment here, reaching people that print and ebook publishing haven't traditionally been able to, is really, sums it up perfectly, because audiobooks is really tapping into, the iTunes music market. You're really competing head to head with people who are driving in their cars and listening to the radio or listening to music. They can now listen to audiobooks, and so it's really opened up the opportunity for people to consume audiobooks where before they really couldn't. And while audiobooks isn't new, obviously CDs and things like that, it is the ease in which the users or the customers can actually access that now, and that's really what makes consuming audiobooks, in the last 1 to 2 years, very simple and accessible. So, to do an audiobook, you need to do pretty much all the same things you do for your other formats of books or products. So you've got to have a product record. you've got to do some financial analysis of how much you think you're going to sell, how much you're going to have to pay the authors or any other contributors. You need to schedule tasks. So how does this line up with other things that you need to do in the publication process, and who's going to be working on it, and when are those tasks complete? We need to have collaboration with digital assets. So that's things like booking audio or ebooks out to potentially people who are going to be reading, then ingesting in your files, producing the supplementary material. You then, once you've got your audiobook, you need to distribute that out to the retailers. You need to have contracts. So can you actually sell audiobooks? Do you have the rights to that? Do you need to acquire that from the author? Selling rights, so you've translated into your local country. Do you then have the rights worldwide? Do you sell the right to perhaps German, to have it translated into Germany, to French, Spanish, that type of thing? Then you need to process the sale of that. You then need to ingest sales in to be able to produce royalties. And we then want to see our sales reporting, which is where are we selling, what types of subjects, who are our customers, all that type of thing. Now, if you have to do this separately and you cannot incorporate this into your current publishing process, this is where you're going to greatly increase your costs. So ideally, all of these things would be, an audiobook would just be another format that rolls into your current publishing processes, and it's got its different creation process, but all of the royalties, the contracts, the rights selling, the sales reporting, and product management and financials should all be part of that standard process. So with Biblio, what our customers do is they will set up their bibliographic records, they will do their cost estimates, they will record the specifications, they will look at the acquisition for a group of products, so it could be a hardback, paperback, audiobook, ebook, whatever it may be, to ascertain, is it worthwhile acquiring a particular title? And what is the cost of those going to be, and the profitability for that project as a whole, as opposed to an individual one? You then will use a digital asset workflow tool to distribute files back and forth in the creation process. We'll then have our contracts and rights managed in here, so you can record what you've done, calculate your royalties, and then do the business intelligence or the sales reporting. So this is really the suite of software that enables you to add audiobooks into your current publishing process. So we said at the start that audiobooks is really just another format of a product suite that you have. So in this example, Maximising IP audiobook is really another product. So you may want to go with a hardback or an ebook first, but then you need to incorporate the audiobook as you go down. Now, you may not do that simultaneously. You may publish that later on, but at least you can plan for this in your acquisition process. Now, what we want though is, if you've built up the metadata, what's the book about, awards, reviews, things like that, you don't necessarily you definitely do not want to have to key that data in again to the audiobook if it's already been implemented into for your ebook promotion, things like that. So you want to synchronize the metadata about the audiobook from your other titles. And then on top of that, you need to customize it, because the way you promote your audiobook will not be the same necessarily as you're doing your other books. So you want to streamline as much as you can to avoid data entry, and then you want to be able to promote that book. So all the jacket images, descriptions, biographies of the author, all that type of thing, you want to be able to enter it once and then redistribute it out. To enable this, we have synchronization of metadata, and so you can choose which fields you synchronize between your editions or your various formats. So you can automatically sync them all, but then you could break those linkages if you did want, for example, the audiobook to have a different set of material for certain metadata fields. ONIX, everyone's favorite friend for getting data out of the system. In Biblio, they have what we call an ONIX Wizard, and this wizard will tell you where you're missing mandatory information that a retailer would require. And so, for an audiobook, you have different sets of metadata that is required from your ebook and from your hardback. So you need some extra data elements in there. And so the wizard will help you identify where you're missing data so that when you send out your ONIX feeds, they don't get rejected and sent back to you. So again, it's about streamlining this and making sure you get the right content out in a timely fashion. So the other part for audiobooks is going to be contributors. Who's involved in your audiobook side of things can be very different to who's involved in your other product formats. So this one, you can record people who are working with specific formats. And in this example, you've got a reader, you've got a recording studio that's specific for the audiobook. So then you can start to manage, which people are managing which projects, and they can manage their schedules and tasks. Now, audiobooks is different in terms of pricing and your options for that. So what you need to be able to do is to do flexible pricing for your audiobooks. And as you put them into different pricing bands, you want to be able to auto calculate pricing across the world, so you don't have to enter in individual pricing for each region and each currency. So we have rules in there that you can select various templates that will then auto calculate your pricing for different regions and currencies. So first step, if it's not financially viable, you don't necessarily want to acquire it. So in Biblio, we have a concept of cost groups, and cost groups allow you to look at the profitability of a project in its entirety and not just the individual format. So in this example, Maximising IP, we're looking at the profitability of the paperback, the hardback, the ebook, and the audio digital. If you ever looked at one of those by themselves, the project may not be profitable, but together they could make a very profitable project when you incorporate all of the options. So what it does is it goes and calculates all of the, based on sales estimates, costs, and these are scaled, the amount of royalties that you'll be paying, calculates a margin and your percentage margin. We then have rules for calculating return on investment and what your minimum should be and profitability. And then it breaks it out by title. So here we've got a hardback, it's got multiple printings, a first printing, a reprint, it's got a paperback with a reprint, and it's got its audiobook and so on. Oops, sorry, skipped through a few slides there. There we go. And so here we can look at the profitability of the audiobook is 64%, while the this hardback version here has a negative value on it, but the profitability of the project as a whole is 65%. So this is giving great insight in terms of whether you should be continuing with reprinting, continuing with ebooks, all that type of thing for moving the project forward. So once you've decided that it's a great idea to go ahead with this audiobook, you've got to schedule your tasks. So in Biblio, you have these scheduled templates. So an audiobook can have different templates to your ebook, to your hardback, but those tasks can be then interlinked. So if you have a task from your audiobook that is reliant on a task in your hardback or ebook or whatever it may be, they can be linked so that you can then, when one task is completed for the hardback, it can automatically update the scheduled task on the audiobooks. So each of the users can be assigned to these schedules, and then they can run their reports to say, show me what tasks I need to do for various products, whether it be the hardback, audiobook, doesn't matter, the system can incorporate them all together. So in this next example, we've got from our master schedule, second page proofs due to editorial. That's part of the template for the audiobooks, but when that's updated on the master schedule, that will automatically update on the child schedule as well. So minimizing data entry and providing visibility across multiple schedules. So we can't do everything ourselves. We need to collaborate with others. So part of that process is to get assets in and out of the system. And so when you are version controlling assets, whether it be, for the manuscript, the file that you're sending out for the audiobook, you want to have commenting on those. So in Biblio, you can upload assets, you can then comment on those assets, you can track the status of those assets, and you can be notified when something changes. Then you can also set off triggers that would, for example, send out the asset to a retailer when it was set to a specific status and it was a specific file type. So all of these things are allowing you to record information, store assets, and share them as required. So this is an example of a screen where you're actually on the project, and then you can choose to upload, invite people to upload, download assets, watch the category. So let's say this was audiobook file, and you just wanted to be notified when the audiobook was delivered back into the system. You can have that notify you automatically. And then this is some examples of how you can actually then interact with others to download these assets. You send them out an invite. They can choose to download the files or upload them back into the system and record specific information about them. So you've got your distribution side now. So with Biblio, our customers will do a range of things, and I'll outline those. But this is really when you've now got your files, you want to send them out to Audible or any of the other audiobook providers, and you want to send out the audio file, you want to send out a jacket image, you want to send out the metadata that we were synchronizing between our hardback potentially earlier. So in Biblio, you can send out an ONIX file and the audiobook file and the jacket image and a reading sample or an audio sample, whatever it is that you want, and send it out to various retailers. Other clients will use CoreSource as an example, where they'll send it to CoreSource, and CoreSource has their various arrangements, and they will then distribute it directly to the retailer. So it really depends what you want to do, but in Biblio you can do direct to the retailer or go through an intermediary if that's a better option for you. But essentially it automates that process. So ONIX and metadata distribution, file distribution is, very complex for people if they don't have a system, or it's very labor intensive. They have to log on to each retailer, upload their files, upload their metadata. But in Biblio, you set up a schedule which would output, in this example, an audiobook feed. You would send it out, you would choose how often you want it to run. It would then automatically go and pick up the metadata and then send out that ONIX file plus whatever digital files or audio files you wanted to send, log on and drop them off at the retailer. So that's really, things are going great. You've produced your audiobook, you've distributed it out to the retailer, and now in terms of the contracts, we want to look at one, and this is a good example of a workflow where in Biblio, our customers can check very early on what rights they have to to their IP. So can they do audiobooks? Can they do ebooks? Is it international? Is it just in a particular region? So Biblio supports all of that. And so with our in this example, it's a contract to Maximising IP, and it's an author contract. And this is where you just store some basic information. This contract is across the audiobook, flexiback, ebook, and hardback. What's nice about this is when you add in the audiobook at the product side and it's out and it's ready to be distributed, it automatically gets added to the contract. So what some publishers, and it can happen, is they get so excited about distributing the audiobook, but it actually doesn't make the loop back to the original contract. And so you then end up having this thing where you've got audiobook sales coming in, or ebook sales, because it can happen across any format, but they're not actually then synchronizing the royalties into the original contract. And so you're not then able to effectively pay your authors. So with this system, publishers automatically know when new products are added and they are linked to the original contract. And so that, as we'll see later on, when sales come in, they're automatically attributed to the various formats and royalty rules that are associated to it. And I should say this is probably one of the big things as well for telling authors about why they should go with you, why they should give you audiobook rights, why they should give you the ebook rights, why they should give you all the rights, is because you as a publisher are able to provide the best service for them globally for the contracting side of things, the metadata promotion side of things, and the costing side of things. Now, with the royalty rules and formulas, the audiobook is going to have potentially different royalty rules and formulas to your ebook. So the ebook will have a particular rate, your hardback, paperbacks will have different rates, and your audiobook will have different rates. So in Biblio, we have templates where they can then record those. So any sales that come in for a particular format will be attributed to one set of royalty rules, where another one, for the hardback in this example, based on sales coming in, based on the territory of the sales and other information, will get a different set of royalty rules applied. So, and again, this is actually coming back to why an author would want to go with a publisher that has a system that helps them manage the entirety of the process and control of the IP. So let's say, for example, you're a publisher in the US or in Australia or in Europe. You have specific skill sets in your local region, but you have partners that are around the world. So when you go to your book fairs and things like that, and you can promote the sale of your books, you've now got another type of right that you can sell. So you've got your audio rights that you can sell. Now, what publishers traditionally, not all, and please, luckily no one can throw any stones at me, but what they are good at is potentially selling rights. What they're not necessarily as good at is tracking the sale of those rights and who owes them income, have they reported back to them. But with a system like Biblio, you can sell the right, you can record who you sold it to, you can automatically track, have they published the audiobook, have they published the ebook, it doesn't really matter, have they translated it, have they reported back to you on sales, how much is the advance. The value of this is really you're saying to an author, we can promote your book worldwide, we have partners, we can sell the IP, but we can then also track the status of it and report back to you. So we're not just a sell, fire and forget, we are actually actively following up to make sure that these publishers that you sell to in another country are actually doing what they have contracted to do. So at the end, we've got right sales going out. We send our files to all the various audiobook retailers, and now we've got sales coming in. With Biblio, you can ingest these sales on a daily basis, if you like, and then you have a live query. So what are your royalty liabilities across a particular contract or a particular period? So here, we're actually able to see sales that have come in. We've got advance that was paid. We've got earnings. These earnings are broken up by ebooks, digital books, hardbacks. If there was subrights income, that would come in, any permissions income. So all of that is visible by just looking at information in the system. And as I said, this could be updated on a daily basis. Now, the next thing is you've got the data, and now it's time to produce a statement. With Biblio, you can produce automatically the royalty statement. The royalty statement is clear to the author about where income is coming from. So you've got here a $2,000 advance. You've then got a breakout of income coming from the ebook, income coming from the audiobook, and then it's got a balance here. If there was right sales, they would be also broken out there. So it would actually show you income from that. And then it actually records all of the who you sold it to, how much you've received, and manages that and reports that back to the author. So you compare this to your competitors who are potentially trying to acquire the same title, and you're providing your author with this level of detail, and you've got this process and technology behind you. This is really what separates some of the publishers from others. And I think the main thing here is that this is automated. So the thing is, in terms of scaling this, is where, you know, people can throw lots of labor at these sorts of tasks, but in the end, you can't scale it. So this is where you're trying to really do as many, maximize your output IP by providing as many formats of your products, and then being able to go through this entire process, which we've done in a very quick time, in as automated as fashion as possible, so that you don't have to keep rekeying data into different systems. So we've got our sales in, we've reported back to our authors, everyone's happy, but now we want to do some analysis. So this is where the business intelligence comes in, and where you can start to analyze sales of perhaps it's a BISAC code or a subject code, or what are the top customers, what are the top regions. So we're now drilling into looking at information that is about sales. And so you can have sales coming in from multiple distributors, and Biblio then consolidates that and then allows you to run analysis on those sales. And so you can then look at it in, you know, author profitability and so on. So this is a very fast overview of the audiobook process and how you can maximize IP, how you can promote to authors your ability to help them maximize their income by being able to provide them robust systems to help promote their content. So we are going to be at Book Expo coming up. So if you would like, please feel free to reach out and send me an email. But Bradley, I'll pass it back over to you.
Rod, great job. We've got a number of questions between the chat function here in the Zoom window as well as in the inbox. Anyone who has watched, who has a question, you can submit a question by hitting the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window, or by emailing dbw@scorepublishing.us, and we will take a look at those and propose those. The first question for you, Rod, is from the inbox, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. What is the biggest challenge that you and Virtusales have seen in incorporating international audio rights into your software?
The biggest challenge is their legacy contracts didn't have necessarily any clauses or any information about audiobooks in them. So there is a process where they need to go back to an agent or an author to then clear those rights. So it's a process, but then in Biblio, they can add in that data to the contract so that they can then see, okay, we have cleared these audiobook rights, but it's really just like it was for ebooks. People didn't know, and the contracts didn't have them.
Okay. So we got a number of questions here coming in. I'm going to take one from John Wynn here. And I'm just going to read this out loud. I'm curious to learn about any insights on creating audiobooks for textbook content. Smart Edition publishes test prep study guides for exams like the SAT, but I'm not clear if there are challenges or how you would approach doing audiobooks for a book that contains 1,000 multiple choice questions or other educational content. Would you say it might not be a good fit, or there are other things to take into consideration when approaching this type of book? There's things that come to my mind, but that's for you, Rod. What do you think?
I mean, the way I think about all these things is just as me as a consumer, because in the end we are all consumers, is how would I do that particular process myself? And, you know, with the audiobook, with the multiple choice questions and things like that, it's a great example. You know, there's obviously going to be some limitations, but yeah, there are limitations. Each format has a limitation. And so not everything is, you know, going to be perfect for each format. So I think you need to test each individual type of product that you're doing. So I don't know if you've got something to add to that, Bradley.
Yeah, no, the only other thing I would add is that is actually a precise use case that's being looked at for incorporating voice technology, which is obviously something we've talked about a lot with Digital Book World. You know, voice assistants and some of these customized voiceover technology, stuff like Vocal ID. There's a number of companies involved in the space where you're seeing pretty much authentic computerized narration of a lot of rote content that no human wants to sit there and read. And a perfect example would be 1,000 SAT questions.
Yeah.
You're gonna see more of that get incorporated into audiobooks. That's what I would add. We got a couple more questions getting added here. And again, if you want to ask a question of Rod, hit the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom window. I'm going to hit answer live on this. This is from Sarah Hartman-Seeskin. Would Biblio stop you from entering metadata or tasks for a right that we did not have?
Yes. So when you go through the process of, let's say, for example, you add your audiobook format to it, there's a gateway where it then triggers for the contract to be then approved. So let's say you've got a contract, you've been on your hardback for years, you're selling it, ebooks off and running, but then you're trying to do an audiobook, then there is a flag that then makes you go and check the rights for your audiobook, and then someone has to approve it. And then once they've approved that, then the product of the specific format audiobook can then go forward.
Okay, excellent. We've got another question from Sarah Butler here. I'm going to hit answer to live. What additional metadata fields are you adding to Biblio or available on Biblio for audio editions?
So there's things like timing. So for each chapter, how long the actual chapters are and what the breaks are in terms of that. They're the sort of main. It's really to do with the content side. There may also, obviously there's metadata information about who's contributing, authors, reviews of the actual narrator as well, which is different to the ebook and paperback, obviously. So these are extra metadata things that you want to incorporate in.
Okay. We've got a question from Laurent Lemure here about distribution. Don't you miss a standard distribution format accepted by all retailers and distributors? How do you name files, package them with ONIX metadata? What about extra files?
That's a great question. And in Biblio, we have a digital packager, and what that digital packager does is allows you to automatically name assets based on each retailer you're sending it to. So, you know, for Kindle or for Audible or for, you know, Barnes and Noble or whatever it may be, you can automatically name each of the assets in a naming convention. So the system will do that for you automatically before it sends the assets out, when it's sending it to them. So it stores the asset once, then renames it when it sends it to one retailer, and then on the way out, we'll rename it with another convention for another retailer. But the metadata, predominantly bar a couple of retailers, is all ONIX.
Okay, we've got 3 more questions here. We got 2 here in the chat, 1 in the chat and 2 here in the Q&A section. We got one from Tibor Kujis. Is it possible to include table of content information into Biblio and link the appropriate assets from the DAM to the table of contents and have this all included in the ONIX feed? As far as I know, the content section can be used, but ONIX does not support this, and the individual chapter files cannot be linked to these chapters. More and more partners are requiring more specific information besides just the product and the files.
Yes, that's getting really down to the detail, and currently the contents, there isn't a digital file that can be linked to, let's say, a chapter, just as an example. In Biblio, but we can actually store all of them at the chapter level, but you will have to send them, all the digital assets would go out. So we could actually send out all the individual chapters as examples, and then we have the table of contents which could go out in ONIX and send that. But they're not linked on the one screen as example.
Okay. This is from Mariana. In the royalties section, is it possible to add different rates for different business models, i.e. sales, subscription, library, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. So that can be, when your sales come in, there'll be sales from one retailer, which may be sort of a type of sale, a subscription. Then you can have the system automatically apply different royalty rules based on the region plus the type of sale.
Okay, and then our last question is actually here in the chat. Rod, this is from Catherine McGuire. Rod, is that business intelligence feature you showed part of the core Biblio Live, or is it a separate module?
It is a separate module, but it's part of the core Biblio system. So, but it is, in terms of a licensing side of thing, it is a module. Okay.
Cool. Rod, if you want to take the screen share down, we'll wrap this up. We appreciate everybody being part of this webinar with us. This will be made available to everyone who registered. That will be sent out by the Virtusales team. On behalf of Digital Book World and Virtusales, thank you for joining us for this webinar.
Thank you.